Story time about my psychotic best friend. So we're gonna call this girl Gia. So a little background information. This all happened whenever I was in 9th grade. I saw Gia sitting at this lunch table alone and I invited her to come sit with my friends and I. And after talking to her, I found out that she was a new student and she didn't have any friends. So her and I started hanging out and we became really close. Like, she would come over my house 24/7. Well, my older sister was a grade above us, and she would act really weird around her. And by weird, I mean like she would always make fun of me in front of my sister, and weirdly enough, try to cause problems between us. My sister didn't really like her. She thought that she was weird, but because she was my friend, she was being super nice to her. Well, like a month later, she started trying to become best friends with my sister. Like, any conversation she would have, I would be like, oh, do you want to come over? She would be like, no, sorry, I'm hanging out with your sister today. And I would go home and I would be like, hey, are you hanging out with Gia today? And my sister would be like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, for part 2. Part 2 about my psychotic best friend. So like I said, my sister was like, no, what are you talking about? So at this point, I'm thinking, oh, this girl's really weird. But it gets even worse. She comes over my house one day to hang out with me and goes in my sister's room the whole time. My sister dyed her hair black, so what does she do? She dyes her hair black too. The obsession was like really fucking weird. Anyway, so the one night that Gia's over, yes, I still had her over after this because I didn't think it was really weird at the time. My sister had her boyfriend over and they were in the living room watching a movie, and the whole time Gia is begging me to go in the living room and watch the movie with them. So I'm like, fine, whatever, we'll do that. We go into the living room, we all sit on the couch, and my couch is kind of small, so like we all had to squish. So she sits her ass right next to my sister's boyfriend. Well, my sister's boyfriend got up and started freaking the fuck out. Well, turns out that Gia was trying to touch him under the blanket. So I told her to leave. The next day, I got a whole paragraph of her saying that she just wanted to be like my sister because she never had an older sister. Story time about my boyfriend's crazy ex-girlfriend. So a little background information. So his ex-girlfriend's parents, they owned a security company, which sold cameras, alarms, and a few other things. So at the end of 2019, my boyfriend broke up with his ex-girlfriend. And by March of 2020, he started seeing me. And at first, we were just keeping things on the down low. Anyways, so after maybe 3 weeks of seeing my boyfriend, his ex sent me an Instagram message calling me a slut. It's the obsession for me. Anyways, what's even weirder is that she knew everything about my boyfriend and I, even the sexual things. Anyways, like I said, I thought that was really weird, so everything that she had sent me, I sent straight to him. Because I thought, obviously, that he had still been talking to her and had told her everything about us. But instantly, he gave me his phone and said go through it, and he had her blocked on everything. So even though it was weird, we moved on from that situation. Well, fast forward another 2 weeks, and his ex calls him while I'm at his house. Like for part 2. Part 2 about my boyfriend's crazy ex-girlfriend. So like I said, she had called him while I was over his house. And somehow she keeps figuring out things about our sex life and personal things that we had told each other. So my boyfriend and I got super suspicious, obviously. Then we started to think, and we noticed that everything that she was telling us were things that we had talked about in his bedroom. And things that we had done. So we ransacked his whole room looking for anything. And what do you know, I found a mini security camera and a microphone pointing out of his walk-in wardrobe directly towards the bed. We took it to the police and tracked it back to her. So it turns out she had used the hidden spare key, which his mom kept under the mat at the front door, which she had known about from when they dated. So she broke into his house, planted a security camera from her dad's business in his wardrobe. So we decided not to press charges because her parents and my boyfriend's parents were friends. So they just talked it out and decided to punish her in their own way.
Story time about how my parents found out I was gay. By the way, this story is anonymous and it's from a boy's perspective. Now, I liked boys since I was about 6 years old, and all through school I always felt like something was wrong with me. I was so ashamed and so embarrassed of myself. My dad was completely against LGBTQ, and my mom just kept all of her opinions to herself. So when I was about 17 years old in high school, I was finally ready to start dating somebody. I was just so tired of all my girlfriends talking about all the guys they date. So they encouraged me to finally step up and talk to somebody. So I got a Tinder, and I finally started talking to this one boy who went to another school. Everything was going perfect, so we planned to meet up at a mall. Ever since then, we started hanging out and everything was great. My friends accepted me, he accepted me, so I was finally ready for my parents to accept me. So after a while of me and this boy dating, I finally told him I wanted to tell my parents about us. But before I could even tell them, they already found out. Like for part 2, also follow my Instagram. This is part 2 story time about how my parents found out I was gay. This story is anonymous and it's from a boy's perspective. So I got to a point where I definitely wanted to tell my parents I was gay, but honestly, the thought of it totally freaked me out and I changed my mind. But then my boyfriend started to feel like I was ashamed of him. I didn't want him to feel like that anymore, so I told him I told my parents about this. I was going to tell my parents, but just not when he wanted me to. So one morning from school, my boyfriend came to pick me up with Starbucks. He knocked on the door and my dad opened it. He goes, "Hi, is Chris here?" which is my name. He says, "Yes, and who are you?" He says, "I'm William, Chris's boyfriend." My dad tells him to come inside and he calls me downstairs. So once I come downstairs and I see him, my jaw dropped. He says, "Are you gay?" Then William goes, "You didn't tell him?" I said, "I'm so sorry, I meant to." My dad goes, "Spent all this time raising you just so you could turn into a FAG?" Then my dad throws me out the house. William later understood how I felt. My mom later divorced him and brought me back home. Part 1 story time about how my own mother was preventing me from having kids. This story is anonymous. Not gonna lie, in high school, your girl was kind of fast. My mom and we did not have the best relationship. She always called me a whore and she told me she was gonna put me on birth control as soon as she got good insurance. So sooner than later, I was on birth control. I snuck around with all types of dudes. I thought being on birth control gave me a pass to do whatever I wanted. And my mom never stopped me. She just didn't want to be bothered by me. So as some years went on, boom, I was in college. So I met this guy, Jared, and he was perfect. Me and my mother were never close, so she didn't think I changed since high school. So after college was over, I brought Jared home to meet my parents. My mom liked him and everything, but then she pulled me aside and told me something later. My mom then told me, "You need to stay your ass on birth control. I don't care who you meet. Knowing how you are, you might cheat on him and have babies with everybody on campus." That was hurtful, but I already made up my mind to get off, like for part 2. Part 2 story time about how my mother was preventing me from having kids. This story is anonymous. So I told my mom, no matter what she thought, I made up my mind already. I'm off birth control. So she's like, "Yeah, we'll see about that." I'm like, "We ain't gonna see about nothing. I'm off." So Jared and I decided to stay with my mom until we found jobs, apartments, etc. Due to some things Jared did when he was a teenager, it was making it hard for him to get a job. Long story short, we were there for a few years. As soon as we graduated college, we had been trying to have a baby, and it just wasn't working. I told my mom about it, but she said, "Don't waste your time going to the hospital. The only reason you can't have kids is because you're stressed out." So we kept trying some months later, but after a while I was tired of it. I snuck and went to a hospital. The doctors ran some tests, and they then told me I was on a hormonal birth control. I sped my ass home so fast. I told my mom what the doctor told me, and then she confessed that she was crushing it up in my food every day. I had never felt so betrayed. And since that was very much illegal, best believe she went and did time. 6 months later, I was pregnant.
My fiancé and I have been together for 6 years and engaged for 3. We decided to wait until I finished with my PhD program for us to get married. I picked a beautiful wedding hall that I was on the waiting list for 3 years to get into. My older sister also got engaged and is planning her wedding 6 months after mine. At our family dinner, she recently revealed that she's pregnant. My sister recently revealed that she was expecting and was going to push her wedding date forward. And she put me on the spot at the table and said, "I was really hoping we could take your venue. I really cannot stress myself too much with planning a wedding while going to maternity classes. And I think it's so beautiful and it would really mean a lot to me." I guess everyone is expecting me to say, "Yes, anything for my little sister." And when I looked at her, I said, "I don't know. I have my heart really set on this venue." She started crying and she stormed out of the room. I tried defending myself, but my mom said, "You waited 3 years. Would have killed you to wait a few more months? When has your sister ever asked you for something?" My fiancé is super upset and wants to disinvite my sister. And my family is giving me the cold shoulder. So am I the asshole for not giving her the venue?
This is why you never get out of your car for a stranger. Back in the 80s, there was this teenager who was speeding home because he didn't want to get yelled at for missing curfew, and the only way to get home was to take this back road that was completely made of dirt. It was in the country. It had no lighting other than his crappy dim headlights. So he's hauling ass down this dirt road, and suddenly he sees this man standing in the middle of the dirt road. So he slams on his brakes, starts sliding on the dirt, and it ends up hitting this guy. So the teenager gets out of the car, he checks the guy, he has a pulse, but he's unconscious. So he picks him up and puts him in his back seat. So he drives 35 minutes to the nearest hospital, and this was before cell phones, so he calls his parents once he gets to the hospital and says what happened, and the parents come and sit and wait with him to find out if he killed the guy or not. So the doctor comes out and says to the teenager, "He's okay, but we're actually kind of glad that you hit him." He's so confused and he asks why. It turns out a lot of people had been going to the hospital because this man would stand in the middle of dirt roads, wait for them to stop, beat them up, rob them, and run away. He even killed somebody and just left them there for somebody else to pick up and take to the hospital. The police were looking for this man for days, and this teenager just had him in his back seat.
If you ever see a random staircase in the woods, you have to get away as fast as you can.
never climb them. There was a story going around a couple years ago stating that there are abandoned staircases in national forests around the world, like deep, deep in the forest away from anybody. It's just a staircase, no other structure attached to it. Some stairs are in ruins, some are perfectly sturdy, some are iron spirals like the kind you'd find in a lighthouse, and they literally just reach up to nowhere. And there are so many different theories as to why these stairs are there and what actually happens when you climb them. Only a few have ever dared to climb the staircases, and the people who have report feeling unnerved and unwelcome or even nauseous when they're up on the stairs. Some people say the stairs lead to another dimension, other people say it leads to hell. Others say that's why so many people and kids go missing in national forests, because they climb these stairs and they're never seen again.
Really messy story time. When I was a freshman in high school, I had just transferred from private school to public school, so I had no friends, I knew nobody, and I didn't know anybody's reputation. Nobody decided to warn me about this girl anyways. So it was fall, it was football season, I was still new, and I had about like 3 friends, and we all hung out in this group. And I could actually walk to school. It was about like a 5-10 minute walk from my house. And the football game had pretty much ended, so we decided to leave to beat the crowd. And on my way home, some lady like hits me with her car. When I say hit me with her car, I don't mean she was going at like 50 miles an hour and my body rolled up on her windshield. It was a slight tap and I fell over. So she gets out of the car, first asks if I'm okay, and then proceeds to scream at me and threaten to call the cops because my body hit her car. And I'm standing there with my friends, and we just decide to start running away from her. And at this point, I'm like 2 minutes away from my house. I am posting part 2 right now.
A story time about the worst date in my entire life. And ladies, this is why you should really know a guy before meeting up with him. By the way, we're calling him Slim Jim. So I met Slim Jim over Instagram. He was cute and he lived in my area. He did me about a date. So a couple weeks later, we went out to dinner. During our date, he seemed pretty cool, but he kept looking down at his phone. I didn't want to get upset because he wasn't my boyfriend. When we ordered, the guy literally gets $200 worth of food, and me, on the other hand, I got a $20 solid. But all throughout the date, he kept looking around and I was so confused. And he constantly said that he needed to go to the bathroom. He told me that he took medicine that made him go to the bathroom a lot. The last time he went to the bathroom, he was going for like 30 minutes, and at that point, I was irritated and ready to go until a random girl walks up to me asking if I knew Slim Jim was here. I told her we were on a date, and she basically told me that she was his girlfriend and baby mama. If you want to know what happened after that, let me know down below in the comments. This is part 2 of the worst date in my life. And the reason why, ladies, you need to really know a guy before meeting up with him. So, like I said before, he left me at a table for like 30 minutes, and I got upset because I thought he was trying to ditch me to pay the bill. Well, then a couple minutes later, a girl comes up to me asking if I was on a date with Slim Jim. I told her yes, and she basically explained that she was his girlfriend and baby mom. Well, at this point, she was his ex-girlfriend. She starts telling me the craziest things about him, that he robs people and that he will soon be doing time for being a part of a murder investigation, and that I should stay away from him because he had HIV and that he gave it to her. I had to ask her, how did you find him? And she tells me that he takes all his new girls here. Then she leaves out the restaurant. 5 minutes later, Slim Jim comes back and tells me he thinks he dropped his wallet. In my head, I'm assuming that he's trying to make me pay for the $200 dinner. So I tell him that I have to go to the bathroom. I'm running out of time. Story time of how I got caught cheating on my boyfriend with his brother. So me and my boyfriend at the time were on and off. Our relationship was really toxic and I was tired of the whole relationship. And everything started to go downhill when he cheated on me and I took him back. I know, stupid, but I really wanted us to work, so I stayed with him. But throughout the relationship, I was very insecure. I constantly thought he was cheating on me, so I started talking to other guys. One of them being his brother. And his brother was the biggest player of them all, but I didn't care as long as I wasn't stressed about what my boyfriend was doing. So one day after school, I met up with his brother at his house and we got it on. I thought that day he had football practice, but no, he came straight home and walked in on us. If y'all want to know what happened after that, let me know down below in the comments. This is part 2 of how I got caught cheating on my boyfriend with his brother. So, like I said earlier, I go to their house to go see his brother, and we got it on. And that day, I really thought he had football practice. But no, he came straight home and walked in on us. When he came in, he grabbed the covers off of us and he literally starts fighting his brother. Then comes over to me and drags me into the hallway, throws all my clothes at me, calling me all types of names and telling me to get the hell out. He then ran and stormed out of the house. And to be honest, the whole time I wasn't even mad. I was glad he caught me cheating on him. Finally gave him a taste of his own medicine.
Story time of how I burned down my entire house when I was 8 years old. So basically, we had so many candles in the house, I guess just because my mom was obsessed with candles. I was also obsessed with fire. So every time I seen the candle, I would put my finger in the fire. And no, it didn't hurt me whatsoever. I guess it was just amusing to me. And everybody called me a pyro. So one day I was scrolling on Musical.ly, and on like the Feature Me page, I saw something with a candle. And it was like how to make your own candle or something like that. But you had to make your own candle out of a candle. So I went into my room and I closed my door. And like the first step was melting the candle all the way. So I lit the candle and then I put a piece of paper in there. I don't know why I did, but I did. And the fire started getting so big, so I lifted the piece of paper and I threw it on my rug. And I didn't want to get in trouble for fire on the floor, so I just left my room and left it alone. And I kid you not, just a couple minutes later, I hear the smoke detector going off. And my older brother screaming. I'm running out of time, like, for part 2. Part 2 of how I burned down my entire house at just 8 years old. So continuing on with the story, after I hear the smoke alarms going off and my brother screaming, I knew exactly what I did. And I blamed it all on my brother. And to this day, they still think it's my brother. Even though it was in my room, but my family believed whatever I said. Anyways, the whole backside of the house was on fire, and we all rush out of the house. And of course, my mom takes care of it. I'm pretty sure she called 911. Well, duh. Sadly, our 2 cats, 2 bunnies, and 4 hamsters were in the house. And our bird, but our bird was getting ready to pass anyways. I'm not sure how, but the house caught on fire so quickly, and the entire thing just blew up into flames. There might have been something else that the fire triggered to make it more big, I guess. I don't really know how to word that. But we ended up raising enough money to move to a different house because we lost every single one of our belongings. When the house burned down, there was only one wall standing, and it was the wall of pictures of my grandma who passed 10 years ago. Story time of how my best friend got so weirdly obsessed with me that she even plotted to kill my boyfriend. So at the time, me and this girl, let's just call her Olivia, had only been friends for about 2 years. I mean, we really did everything together. We were with each other 24/7, and I mean, we were pretty good friends. But the only thing about our friendship is she did not like when I had other friends. I mean, she didn't have any other friends herself, but literally she would joke around about strangling my other friends because she didn't like when I gave my attention to anyone else. But honestly, I just thought of it as a joke. And then I started dating this guy, let's just name him Jacob. He was probably the sweetest guy I had ever met, and he was a real simp for me. So we started dating and about 4 or 5 months go by, and he started getting these texts from a random number. And it would always be cringy things like leave her or you die, get away from her, and like stupid cringy threats. Then one night, me and him were just hanging out. Then he gets a text with his exact address saying he had till tonight to leave me, or he wouldn't see another day. Then we hear a knock at the door. I'm running out of time, like for part 2. Part 2 of how my best friend got so weirdly obsessed with me that she plotted to kill my boyfriend. So continuing on with the story, we heard a knock at the door and it ended up being her. And she said, "Oh, I'm just coming by to check on you and make sure you're okay." Mind you, we were at his house. And he looks at me like, what is she doing here? So I asked her to leave, and then she ends up getting so mad at me just because I asked her to give us alone time. So the night goes on, and then when I get home, she's in my room. At this time, my whole entire family was out of town, and I was the only one home. So I was like, hey. It was literally just like a normal night, and then I go to shower, and when I get back out of the shower, she's gone. And then my boyfriend calls me, and he goes, "Why is Maddie here?" She had like this black mask on, but she's stupid enough to not realize that we know it's her. And I mean, we're being real here. She was my best friend at the time, so of course he's not going to call the police on her. But she had a knife in her hand, and he opens the door and he like pins her against the wall and then calls 911, I guess. And then to sum it up, when they get there, she tells them everything that she was going to do, and then they put her in a mental hospital. But she said that she was going to murder everybody that gets close.
So I can't really tell if it's romantic or not that my boyfriend put me up as the prize to a race without me knowing. To give some backstory, we were dating on and off for about 1.5 years. And we'll just go ahead and call this man Brad. We met in health class and he was kind of an a-hole, but I honestly fell so hard for him. Well, around this time, he sold his old car and got a beautiful 2015 black Charger. And let me tell y'all, I would feel like such a baddie when he'd come pick me up. And when I moved an hour away, he would still come pick me up weekly and take me to nice hotels. Well, one day he was talking to me about how obsessed his friends are with me.
which I thought was so strange, but he was like, yeah, I showed them your picture. They all think you are so fine. And I guess they all talked about how they wish they could have a chance with someone like me and blah, blah, blah. And that's when he decided to enter his fancy little car into a race. He asked me if I wanted to come see him perform, but we were in the dead of winter, so I was like, probably not. That's when he started begging me and told me that the prize was really important. So I decided to go. Follow my Insta. Storytime part 2 to my boyfriend putting me up as the prize for a race without me knowing. So when I showed up, I had a feeling that the prize was pretty important. So when I finally saw him, I was like, hey, so what exactly is the prize? And he gave me the weirdest look and he was like, babe, you know how all my friends think you're hot, right? I was like, I mean, sure. And he goes, well, I told them whoever wins gets to be your boyfriend. So I was like, WTF, Brad? Why would you do that? And he just looks at me and goes, don't worry, I'll win. And I was like, well, you better. So I literally stood out there in the cold watching a race that I could barely see. There was someone really tall in front of me. My heart almost dropped several times because I kept hearing Brad is gonna lose. And then I pushed the guy in front of me out of the way and saw Brad cross the finish line. One of his friends actually came up to us after the race and claimed that Brad cheated to win. He was probably just a sore loser, but we celebrated the rest of the night. If you guys have a story you'd like to share, follow me and DM me on Instagram. Raise your hand if you've ever had a friend expose you to all of Instagram. So this girl we can call Kendall and I had been best friends for 9 years. And ever since we were kids, she would kind of cycle in and out of being a fake friend or not. I really believed the best in Kendall and would always forgive her for the things she would do and move past it. But this came around to bite me. So fast forward to May of 2019, I started dating a guy that we can call 𝙠𝙤. He was really cool to be around, but he had some childish habits. We really wanted, doing the nasty to be special in our relationship. So we waited 8 months to do it. And when we started, he would always bother me about recording it. I always felt really bothered by the idea of there being a recording of that. But about the millionth time of him asking me, I agreed. I thought he loved me and wouldn't expose me. So we did it, and I ended up showing it to 2 of my friends. But I avoided showing it to Kendall because that just gave me a weird feeling. Eventually, Kendall and I hit one of our cycles where we weren't talking again. And during this time, 𝙠𝙤 and I got so toxic that we decided to break up. And during this breakup, 𝙠𝙤 decided to send the video to Kendall. That's when this video ended up on the story of someone's Finsta page. Like for part 2. Storytime part 2 of my best friend exposing me doing the nasty on Instagram. So 𝙠𝙤 literally sent Kendall over the video of us doing the nasty, while Kendall and I were in the middle of our argument. And on someone's close friend's story on their Finsta, they uploaded the video. Then after that, it was on 2 other exposing pages. Everyone from my school saw it and people from other schools in my town saw it, and then my family had seen it. This was genuinely one of the hardest things that I ever had to go through. People would talk about me, make pages to bash me, and I lost so many friends from this. I was at my lowest and completely depressed, but I had my close friends and family there to get me through it. And now I've officially sued both Kendall and 𝙠𝙤. The court dates have not occurred yet because of the pandemic, but I'm doing much better and working on my own little business and trying to leave the whole situation in 2020. If you guys have a story that you'd like to share, follow me and DM me on Instagram.
Storytime on how I found out my husband was virtually cheating on me. And when I say virtually, I mean he was cheating on me with a girl online, an 18-year-old. Mind you, my husband is 56. So we've been married for about 10 years. We both work. We didn't have any kids. We decided we didn't want to have any kids. So he's a lawyer. Let's call him Ben. And I'm a teacher. Now let me just tell you how I found out. So Ben has an at-home office, and he's been acting really weird. He's been spending a lot of time in his office. He knew the exact time I got home every day, unless it was an early release day. The day I found out, it was an early release day, but it wasn't in my schedule. Something just happened at the school, and we had to let the kids go early. So I leave work. It was around 11 a.m. I was calling him to see if he wanted any lunch, but he wouldn't answer my phone calls. So I drove straight home so that we could go out and have some lunch together. Part 2. Part 2 on how I found out my husband was virtually cheating on me. So I got home and I guess he didn't hear me. I could hear that he's having a conversation, but I didn't want to interrupt. But I was also very curious because it was a woman. So I'm standing by the door and I hear him say, "I love you." Now his raggedy ass doesn't have a sister. And I know for sure it wasn't his mom. So who the hell was he saying "I love you" to? I opened the door, and when I tell you my jaw dropped, he was standing up in front of his laptop, masturbating on camera. I ran towards him to see who he was talking to and masturbating on camera with. And I just want to say, he was in shock. He did not move as soon as I opened that door. Anyways, I saw this young girl on camera, butt naked. She turned off her camera right away. so I didn't have time to say anything to her. But I'ma just say it's not her fault, it's his fault. Long story short, he told me everything because he wanted me to forgive him, told me she was 18. That's a deal breaker. Do you just have that one psycho ex? Storytime on how I dated a psychopath. And this story is actually mine. And surprise, I met him on Tinder. And we hit it off really quick. Like, we didn't go through that awkward phase where, like, you know, that you're shy. Anyways, my first red flag was when we were just relaxing at his house. And my phone rings and it's my cousin. My boy cousin. Well, he got mad at me. He was going on how I was cheating on him. Well, whatever. That day I had to go to work, where I was gonna work an overnight. And he actually drove me there. When I tell you he waited for me from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. because according to him, I was cheating on him at work. Long story short, after that day, he would wait for me outside of my job and called me a whore every chance he got. Well, one day I was doing another overnight, but this time I didn't tell him about it. Well, guess who showed up out of nowhere? This is where it gets crazy, so just go to part 2. Part 2 about my psychopath boyfriend. Well, he texted me and told me to go outside, and if I didn't, he would go in the restaurant and make a big scene and let everyone know that I was a whore. So I went outside because I didn't want him to make a big scene. And when I tell you he was bawling his eyes out, talking about how I cheated on him and how he loves me so much. Bullshit. But I actually didn't buy it and broke up with him right there and then. Well, he owed me some money, or he stole some money from me, said he was going to pay it back. So I asked for my money. And he said, oh yeah, I'll have it for you in a few weeks. A few weeks go by and he goes to my house to give me my money. And I tell him, okay, I'm going to open the door for you. Let me know when you're outside. This dude just walks in without my money and threatened me that wherever I was, he was going to find me. Long story short, I didn't get my money back. I was paranoid 3 months. For about 6 months, he wouldn't stop calling my work. And a couple weeks ago, he emailed me. Don't know how.